Terrific. Well, once again, thank you and welcome for joining the webinar today. We have really a great webinar in store for you and some an expert with us that I think you really enjoyed getting her perspective on leadership, where the challenges are and the different competencies that leaders are looking to build going into 2022 and beyond. Let's see, leaders, you're all leaders. I do these webinars for leaders because I want to help you grow. I want to help the leaders be better at what they do. And so today's webinar, we really is focused on the fact that we've had this really a crisis going on over the past 2 years, 1 to 2 years. We've all been in crisis mode, responding kind of hand to mouth. And we have to start to turn the page, and we need to put this behind us. We need to start thinking more strategically as leaders about the work that we're doing. So that's what this is about today. We first need to understand what the challenges are that we think are going to continue to exist, and then also understand the skills as leaders we want to build. So you might be thinking, how do we do that again, right? I mean, what skills do I need going into 2022? Well, today I have really the pleasure of having Christine LeLacheur, who's a noted coach, consultant, communications expert, author, a lot of different things that she does. And she's agreed to come here and join me, and we're going to help brush off some of those cobwebs for you leaders and talk about growing your leadership skills. So we're going to learn about the challenge. Pardon. Yes, I'm sorry, Christine.
Say hello. I said thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So we also have on the call Stefania Forbes, who's a marketing strategist for ILEC. And Stefania is going to help as a moderator for our session today, because Christine and I have both agreed that we tend to kind of get going on a story, and we'll probably run past the time that we have allowed with you for the webinar. So she's going to kind of keep us on track. But she's also going to be monitoring the chat function for questions that you might have, and we're going to try to pick those up along the way. So with that,
thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Stefania. I just wanted to let you know, some of you signed up, and we did say that we were going to have some complimentary gifts. We have the book, which is Intelligent Leadership. I have that here. For those of you that stick around for the entire webinar, we're going to give you some information in terms of how to get the book sent to you. We also have a couple of other complimentary gifts, so please stick around to the end, because we're going to show those and take care of that right at the end. Okay, so we hope you find this talk valuable today.
Awesome. Free swag, right. I love it.
So our agenda today, right, what we're going to cover, why don't we go ahead and, all right, so first of all, I want you to be able to meet the coaches. So both Christine and I will introduce ourselves, and you'll get a chance to get a feel for our backgrounds and where we come from. We're going to talk about the challenges for leaders. Now, there's been a lot of challenges out there, but for today's session, we're going to talk about those ones that have really been sort of post-pandemic, as we emerge from the pandemic, and what leaders are dealing with. And then the meat of the subject is around the critical competencies. We're going to talk about the critical competencies that both Christine and I believe are important for you to have as leaders, or to build on, to polish, whatever your thought process is there. But we want to share those with you, and we have some stories to share. We're going to talk a little bit about building resilience, which is kind of an underlying theme for all of these competencies, and one that will help them to kind of stick and be sustainable. And then we're going to have some final thoughts, and we'll share that complimentary gift information with you. So meet the coaches, right? My name is John Burt, right? I've got over 36 years of experience in management consulting. I consider myself a recovering management consultant. I work with a number of large firms, IBM most recently for 18 years. I was a consultant and a partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers before that, and with Ernst & Young. So, for me, consulting has been my life. I've worked with a number of large companies, large and small, with the C-suite executives, but also with executives and leaders down to the shop floor. So, for me, this is a passion and something that I feel has been my calling for quite some time, even though I've been doing different type of work in the business consulting. As I mentioned, most of my work has been with executives and leaders to improve their business and to help them with leading change efforts. I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of executives and leaders across the world. I've counted the other day, and I think I'm at probably around 40 or so companies, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that I've worked with in over 24 countries around the world. I've had the really good fortune to serve in many leadership roles over my career with the different companies, both internal, but also many client-facing roles. And I've also had a lot of success in developing strong leaders and helping these leaders to inspire and build high-performance teams of their own. And I'm a master certified intelligent leadership coach with Intelligent Leadership Executive Coaching. So now over to you, Christine.
How do I follow that CV? Oh my goodness. Well, I'll try. So hi everyone, my name is Christine LeLacheur. I loved how you pronounced it. We've completely anglicized it over the years, but it definitely has the French background. So I have been, I don't know how I have a background of 20 years, right? I must have started when I was 10. I'm going to go with that. And I've been doing coaching, consulting, working in the areas of communication and marketing over that time. I've also been a professor, a sessional instructor in the areas of organizational behavior, human resources, marketing, and even entrepreneurship. I am a little bit of, I describe myself as a serial entrepreneur. I've had my own business doing consulting and coaching and instructional design and program development and facilitation over the past 10 years. And like John, I've worked with leaders all across the organization, from the C-suite down to frontline. Many of those I've worked with have actually been emerging leaders and those who are at that middle management level and or otherwise, leading their own teams within an organization. So John, I think it's actually a great compliment because we cover all of our bases when we're talking and giving perspectives and stories on those who we've worked with. Really enjoy, as John said, very passionate about working with those to help really engage and, enlighten and ignite leaders to not only learn more about themselves and leading from their strengths, but helping their team do the same thing. So I'm really excited to be here with you today and can't wait to have our chat.
Well, thank you, Christine. And as I mentioned early on, right, I mean, you can all tell why I'm so excited about having Christine here. She just brings this wealth of experience, and I think it's going to be a great interplay that we have later on. So I also want to thank you, Christine, again, for taking your time to come on and share some of your insights. As we talk about leadership and key competencies today, I'd like to just take a moment to reflect on what our role as leaders are. Right? I think that it's important that leaders are continuously improving our skills and capacity as leaders, and that's what this webinar is all about. And hopefully, you'll get some nuggets out of this today for your leadership. But this quote from Simon Sinek is a key one for me because I think it really captures the essence of today's discussion. Right, that leaders' top priority is really to inspire and to motivate people, and without inspired people, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to get done. Right, your strategy is going to go into the toilet. A great leader helps others discover the ideas and supports them in terms of turning them into reality. And these are different competencies that you might have valued in the past as leaders, and maybe even those that have gotten you noticed as a sole contributor. So today we're going to focus on the critical competencies that leaders need to inspire and motivate others. So I'd like to just take a moment, right? Past year and a half, we just had just a tremendous impact on everyone, right? I mean, this idea that people are just completely stressed out. In a recent Forbes study, 94% of workers reported being stressed, right? And 78% of leaders had reported that they believe that this coronavirus pandemic has really severely impacted their mental health. 40% are making more flawed decisions than they were before. which should really frighten for many of us, right, in terms of what a decision, what the role that many of us play in these organizations. And 90% have concluded that the newfound work-related stress affects their home lives, right? They're bringing this home. Now, we're also in a hybrid mode in many cases still. So you are working from home, and that can be really an unsettling statistics for you. But helping leaders to overcome these unprecedented levels of depression, anxiety, and even PTSD is what we do as coaches, what we do as leaders. And so hopefully this will be something that will be of value today to go through. So in terms of the top leadership challenges, I think that it's important. These issues many of these issues are not necessarily new. The leaders have always have had a number of challenges and pressures. But these issues that I'm hearing from my clients and my leaders network, and Christine, you can add in here too. But these are new that have really been focused on the issues related to that have come out of the pandemic.
I think it underpins, like, a lot of the same challenges are still there, but how they're manifesting and presenting themselves are very much related to what our current environment is.
Exactly. So, starting off with this Great Resignation. Actually, I was thinking, I just saw the statistic today that in October, 4.2 million people left their jobs in the U.S. alone. That was on top of the 4.4 million that we saw in September and 4 million in August. So they've been on a roll. We have over 10 million open positions, in the U.S. But people are leaving their jobs in droves, and this is a very troubling situation for many employers and for many leaders. And just really like to understand, Christine, if do you have a perspective on the Great Resignation, and are you seeing this as something that's real?
Yeah, definitely. We're hearing across different organizations, many different types of companies. If you drill down into the data, a lot of it is happening more at your frontline staff. The service level, et cetera, but it still is happening in professional organization as well. Many of my clients, of course, many of them are still working, but what's happening is people on their teams are leaving. And so not only is this having a ripple effect of, trying to figure out how to backfill and hire new staff, but also it's trying to figure out who takes on the work, and it's ending up landing on the shoulders of people who are already really busy and dealing with all of these other challenges that, we can talk about, like looking at the rolling pandemic. We call it the rolling pandemic because it just kind of is feeling like it's not ending. And we keep, I said to someone today, I'd be a wealthy person if I got $1 every time I heard, well, we're just going to wait till we're back in the office. Like, when we're back in the office. And unfortunately, due to different circumstances, that for many has been delayed and delayed and delayed. And what's happening is people are getting like just this feeling of, actually Adam Grant, who's an industrial psychologist, really put it best on languishing, like just this feeling of not flourishing, not necessarily failing, but just this middle point. And it can be exhausting in that period where you feel like you're in a hamster wheel.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't really initiate any major change or feel like you can really implement a strategy because you don't know what the landscape is going to look like. And this start, stop, think about it as the Gerbil Wheel, right? You just keep going and going and going. And I think, and we are all exhausted. You use the word exhausted. I think that's a good one. The other thing I'm hearing, Christine, is this idea of the hybrid working, right? This is the biggest issue that most leaders and most companies or organizations are dealing with, is we now recognize this new normal is going to have some type of hybrid work environment. Now, exactly what that looks like may be uncertain, but certainly the employees are demanding it.
Yeah, and I think, it's a double-edged sword. So it has a lot of advantages to it, and being able to work within what people are looking for and how they feel they work best. However, from a leadership and management perspective, I would say the hybrid is probably one of the most difficult workforce models to work within, even more so than straight virtual or straight in the office, because you're now having to manage, what happens if you have team meetings and some people are not there and some people are in the office, and how do you make everyone feel engaged and motivated when you have, either sometimes there, sometimes at home, all the time at home. So it can really present a lot of challenges for managers who've already been struggling with trying to figure out how to motivate and engage with a virtual workforce.
Yeah, and some of the folks that are choosing to work in a remote area, one of the things I'm hearing, Christine, is that they feel that they're going to be disadvantaged, right? Some will be in the office, they'll be having their coffee chats, or they'll be, talking to each other before or after meetings. But, them being outside the office, they need to take, I guess, extra care that they stay engaged with what's going on with the folks that are in the office.
Yeah, and even for leaders and managers, it's to be cognizant of that as well. And that sometimes becomes an unconscious bias, is not even realizing that it's easier to have these, I say the hallway chats or the water cooler chats and catching up and filling each other in on information. You lose that when someone's not physically present.
Definitely. And what about social and environmental justice? These are topics that are really becoming, omnipresent in the work environment as well. We used to, obviously had this outside, but this is topics of discussion in terms of how organizations and what is their viewpoint, or are they acting strong enough to ensure social and environmental justice in their work practices and in their strategies?
Yeah, we definitely saw this also take place during the pandemic with the BLM movement, and just really a shift in focus and a drive to focus more on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really focus on it as opposed to just talking about it. And it's also being driven like a more grassroots swell as well. And, this is where you see too with the younger demographics, younger generations coming into the workforce, is they're also the ones demanding. They want to see change, and they want to see more emphasis and more focus on the social and environmental justice with, climate control, etc. Yeah,
and they want an authentic type of leadership from their companies, and that's what I'm hearing is part of that great resignation, as companies are starting to align their personal views of of where the world should be with what their companies are doing.
Yeah, a lot of dovetailing between all of these different challenges and factors.
Absolutely. And of course, then the economic uncertainty. I think, this morning, I'd heard that Amazon is now having to spend 3 times as much as they had before the pandemic in terms of attracting and landing employees. There's a number of employees, unions that are going on strike because of they feel that this is the time that they need to get higher wages for their frontline workers. And this really has an impact on leaders that are trying to put together a full complement of workers and staff and serve their customers.
Yeah, definitely. With we're also hearing a lot of labor shortage challenges, and so the power shift has readjusted, and that's where you're getting many of those realizing this is the opportunity to take to put more emphasis on what they're looking for from the employee worker perspective.
Yeah. This all leads to this idea that workers, but also leaders, are feeling really insecure in their positions and their ability to execute. They're fearful of what the future holds. This idea that they don't really know what the next step is going to be, and worst of all, they feel like they're underperforming, which is a very stressful situation for a leader to be in. Right? So what we want to talk about next is really how do we ensure that these leaders have the right skills. But I do want to touch on just for a second the sort of the overarching organizational challenges that are out there right now. Stefania, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question that I wanted to share. A person on the line said that he's thinking that the social justice movement is an opportunity to shift from a company with a mission to a mission with a company, with our teams. Great culture for attracting talent and customers. So what do you guys think of that idea?
That's actually very insightful. I think that companies, some companies are going to be a little bit stuck, but in terms of reshaping that mission so that, or the strategy for the company, so that it matches an overall mission that can be readily identified and grasped by the employees as well as the leaders. That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, I love that. The mission with the company, because what that really shows is it's centering on the mission. That's where the focus should be centered on. Love it.
Great. All right. Well, so in a study that was done in 2020, this is an MIT Sloan review study. They did it with 5,000 business leaders, and the results were that there was 12% of those that were surveyed feels that the leaders had the right mindset to be leading them forward. And that, so only 12% of companies felt that their leaders had the right mindsets to lead them forward.
That's not a lot.
That is scary, honestly. So, I've been involved in this, and Christina, you've had some experience with this as well, but, companies are always trying to build those robust leadership pipelines, but with 10 million job openings right now, or 10 or 12 million job openings right now, and many of those are leadership positions as well. So companies are struggling with building out those leadership pipelines and getting good talent on board. And then, 10% of these respondents said that they strongly agreed that their organizations had the right skills to survive. So there's a lot of work to be done for companies. And I think that the top level leadership of many of these companies is starting to recognize that too, that there are gaps in their ranks and in their strategy for how to attract and develop leadership within their companies.
Right, and ultimately to be able to face and manage these challenges that we just previously identified. And I think, what you're saying too is that a lot of this is related to not necessarily not having the people, it's looking at the skill sets and the competencies and recognizing there is a gap, not necessarily in the people, but there's a gap in the competencies they need in order to lead organizations forward and navigate these challenges. So I think that's where we're going to focus now.
Yes,
on
absolutely.
Those,
so let's get into
competencies.
Why don't you go ahead and lead us off on this first one, Christine?
Sure. So, we'll talk about each of the four here, but these essentially are the four competencies that John and I have identified on really being critical to adjust to this, the new normal. That's another one. If I had $1 for every time I heard, the new normal, and ultimately looking at self-awareness, duty mindset, vulnerability, and stay present and course correct. So I'm going to chat about self-awareness, and then John, I'll throw it over you to talk more about vulnerability. Stefania, you can flip over to the next slide here. So with self-awareness, I think we've all, heard the importance of learning more about ourselves, which can become, I would say, even more important as we move into leadership positions. So it is interesting on the more we're working with others and leading others is the more we really need to reflect on ourselves and look in the mirror. When we're talking about self-awareness, it is part of, it's actually a foundational piece of building our emotional intelligence as leaders. And if you look to Daniel Goleman, who is one of the forefathers of the emotional intelligence movement, he looks at it as, building it sequentially. And so when you're looking at managing others and being aware of others, you really need to start first with being aware of your own self-awareness, right? And then figuring out how to manage your own emotions, behaviors, etc., before moving outward. Many times, what I found working with leaders is they want to jump. They want to jump just straight to figuring out others and managing others, as opposed to, you know, putting that mirror up to themselves. But this is a very critical first step. It's why it's the first one we're talking about. And there's two sides to self-awareness too that we don't always consider. Is there's the internal self-awareness. So that is really being in tune to what's going on, you know, what matters to you, what you value, where your strengths are, how you respond to things, what your feelings are, how you behave, how you react to things. But there's also the external self-awareness, and that is very much about, you know, what other people understand about you as well. And John, if I can just quickly share a little story here, I have, I think, what I think of as a pretty good analogy to really understanding this perspective of internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. You know, it is the holiday season, and for many of us who celebrate Christmas, I was walking along the street with my husband, and we noticed one of our neighbors has a very large, beautiful Christmas tree in their front window, and, you know, with the lights all lit up, and it really attracts attention, especially in the evening. And this was a number of years ago. We noticed, you know, they don't have any decor yet. Okay, well, maybe it's just too early in the season. Maybe they wait a little bit. You know, sometimes you hear people doing it right before Christmas. They're gonna add the ornaments. And, you know, days pass by, weeks pass by, never added the ornaments. We're like, that's really weird. And this went on for a couple years, and it became the house, the weird house that doesn't decorate their Christmas tree. We're like, this is very strange. And honestly, it's a little embarrassing in how long it took me to have this, you know, light bulb moment, recognizing one year. So it was multiple seasons, recognizing, going, oh, that's the back of their tree. They do not need to decorate the back of their tree because all of the decor, all the ornaments are on the front of their tree. That's what they're looking at from their perspective. And it just struck me as such a great analogy on really getting that full 360-degree perspective and understanding, you know, not only what our own perspective is, but maybe how it looks to other people, and appreciating that what we see might not be the same as what others see. And you know, I don't know about you, John, but I've found that that is one of the main benefits people find with working with coaches is it can give them that perspective, or at least through challenging maybe some of their perspectives to help them see others and be able to really understand who they are and how they relate to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all had those moments, Christine, where you just your head goes one place, and then you have that aha moment. And I think that's what we try to do as coaches, right? We want to, I think everybody thinks that they have a good understanding of who they are as a person and how they're interacting in the workplace. But and I loved your comment about the fact that people want to jump ahead. They want to get to, well, what are the 5 tips you're going to teach me to be a better leader? But many of these aha moments that you have, the kind of the wow moments with folks, are just letting them see themselves and trying to understand how their emotions are driving their behaviors, how those values, thoughts, and beliefs are that they have deep down inside, how those are showing up for people in how they are at work. Right? I mean, do they exhibit, you know, do you exhibit loyalty? Do you exhibit honesty or modesty? What do you think you're doing? And then how other people perceive you and or not perceive you if you think you're doing some of the right things, and your teams don't recognize that in you. So it does really crystallize that for some people and brings it into focus. Good points. So next one up is this decision to be vulnerable. Right? I always think that if you're going to try to get different results in your life, right, you really need to kind of have the courage to disrupt yourself. You have to be willing to do something different. And this idea of asking for feedback, you know, honestly, trying to get feedback from people, How am I showing up for you? How am I doing my work? I think is important. Right? I had a client. I'll just share a little a story with you. I had a client that was in a company, pretty senior. He'd just gotten hired into a fairly senior level into the company. He wasn't doing he didn't think he was doing very well. And he was, really nervous. The other, executives are around him, his peers were doing really well. And his results were suffering, but he didn't know what to do. He just gotten this job, his dream job, and he really wanted to do a good job. But he didn't know where to go and where to find help. He didn't want to go to the senior executives for help because he didn't want them to think that they had made a wrong decision in the hiring process. But in working with this executive, I was able to get him to understand that, asking for help was not a weakness, but it was actually a sign of strength, that you're willing to evolve, and you understand that you want to be better at what you do. And so with that new knowledge that he had that courage to go talk to the CEO, the one that hired him, and ask for their help. Right? CEO jumped right on and said, "Yeah, let's set up some time. Let's talk." So they've set up a series of meetings so that new executive could get the coaching and mentoring that he needed. But it all started with that executive having the courage and to admit and be vulnerable with the executive to say, "I need help, and I need somebody to help and mentor me."
Yeah, I think the other great thing about being able to have that courage and put yourself out there as a leader is, by doing that, it really sets the tone to the rest of your team that it's okay to do that. And they're more likely to show vulnerability. It becomes a little bit of that law of reciprocity where, if I show vulnerability to you, then it's safe to show vulnerability to me as well, and make it more of that safe space for you to be able to not only grow and have your team grow as well if they're feeling safe. Because ultimately, if he was struggling, that still exists regardless of whether or not he admits to seeking help.
Yeah, and that vulnerability, this law of reciprocity, also builds a lot of trust with the team members. That's an additional byproduct, which I think is valuable for those leaders. Right? The trust.
Yeah, and trust works the same way, right? A lot of times, like, extending trust to them is how you get trust from others.
Right. That's good point.
Yeah. So looking, next at duty mindset, and I know, John, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, because I know we approach this one a little bit differently here, but ultimately with this one is for leaders, and where it becomes a critical competency is it can be a challenge for some, and especially those who are new to the role, to understand the shift that happens from being more of an individual contributor and being, as many times where promotions come from is being the superstar, the top individual contributor, and then suddenly being in a situation where it is no longer about those individual contributions, but about the team contributions, and understanding that your role is now about helping paint a vision for the future for the rest of your team and getting them all to work together. But ultimately, they may be a number of individual contributors who are still focused on that as well. So with duty mindset, we're looking at, having the ability to help others see what the bigger picture is, and that vision and that purpose is in an organization, beyond just individually the what's in it for me. And while, some of us look to what's happening in the workplace as people are very much focused on that me first mentality and, the what's in it for me, there are actually a number, and again, I would say you're going to see it in these new generations coming in. Well, I don't even want to say coming in, because people keep referring to the millennials as the young ones, and they're not. They're actually, they've hit 40. The oldest millennials are now 40. But they're very much putting more emphasis and focus on what is the bigger picture. It goes back to talking about some of these challenges with the pandemic, where they want to see, what do companies do for social and environmental justice, and what am I doing, and how does this play into the bigger picture? It's more than just that reciprocal, get a paycheck for what work I'm doing. And so as a leader, it becomes even more important to help your team work together and to see what that purpose and vision is. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, and just statistics that I saw the other day, that there were over 30%, I think it's 33 or 34% of all the leadership positions right now are being held by millennials. So that definitely we're past the, they're just kind of coming into the workforce.
Right. They are now the leadership, and soon I think, they're just at, or but like they're going to outnumber the baby boomers in those leadership positions anytime.
Yeah, in just in the next couple of years. I wanted to, this idea of having a mission. There was a study that was done by IBM recently where they indicated that the top performing companies were actually, were reported significantly that the employees were looking for companies with a mission or a purpose for the company. And so I think that the shift is there. I think where I would like to suggest is that leaders, especially some of those boomer leaders, need to be really careful that this is what employees are looking for. It's no longer about giving them a fat salary or promising them bonuses. They do want that mission, that authenticity of the purpose of the company, and they want that to be authentic on down in terms of how the company is managed as well. So I do think that there's a shift, and it's probably the onus is on the leaders, maybe many of them that are on this call, that have younger workers that are in the workforce that are looking for this. They're just to be cognizant of the fact that it's their role, right, to inspire. Going back to that quote I mentioned, going to create the inspiration, create the the sense of duty, the shared vision and strategy, and communicate that to the organization.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Dennis, I think, had commented on the mission with the company, and that's becoming more and more important. Stefania, I do see the question, so we can address that in
Okay, got it. Yeah.
I just want to also highlight that it really plays into, actually research from the mid-century, many years ago, looked at what's called motivation hygiene factors. And ultimately, you talked about the fat salaries, etc. Those are so important. You're still going to get people like wanting to be paid fairly, etc. But they can act as demotivators, like those, what are considered these hygiene factors, pay and bonuses and working conditions, etc. But they're not great at acting as the motivators. So once you hit a certain base level and you've satisfied people there, it's the more internal, intrinsic rewards, which are your values and mission and vision, that are the ones that drive that motivation there. Mm-hmm. So John, I don't know if you saw the question asking about personality type, introverted versus extroverted, as being the most important factor to be chosen as a leader. What do you think? I have thoughts, but I'd like to know what you think.
I'm not sure that I think that it's probably evenly split. I have a client that I'm working with that is not a very external, not a very extroverted individual, yet they're in a leadership position. So they recognize that communication is key, right? But also active listening is key. So perhaps that depending on what the leadership competency or skill they're currently involved in it, being an extrovert or an introvert could help. If you to be somebody who's a public speaker and out talking about the company's strategy and their mission requires good communication skills, and typically extroverts do better with that. Introverts perhaps tend to be better listeners, right? That they're more thoughtful and listening to the world around them and the individuals in front of them in terms of what their needs are. So I would say maybe maybe you need to have a little bit of both, right?
Yeah, I would have to say, and I say this as an extrovert, that it becomes a little bit of the squeaky wheel. And so we tend to think, leaders need to be extroverts, they need to be out there and speaking and, charismatic. However, that's what we're seeing. So I think that, it's something just to keep in mind that it's what we're exposed to. It's the people making the magazine articles and being on social media, etc. It's not necessarily indicative of a successful leader. And I personally believe that it can be both. Essentially anyone can lead from their strengths to be an effective leader. It's just figuring out how to channel those strengths and in areas where, for instance, if you are required to do public presentations and that's not, where your strength comes from, is figuring out how to be able to do that still effectively. So I would agree with you that I think you see, half and half. Another thing to remember too is extroversion and introversion isn't always necessarily about who's out there and, the charismatic leader. Some of the most charismatic people I know are actually introverts. It's very much about where they get their energy from and how they restore their energy. So, you have introverts needing more time alone to recharge, but it doesn't mean that they can't network and engage with other people and have those social relationships. Alternatively, it doesn't mean that extroverts can't be good listeners or can't have those, one-on-one deep conversations. It just might take something different to re-energize them.
Yeah. I think in coming back to this duty mindset and maybe finding your passion, I think for a lot of people, the speaking skills, trying to be more extroverted, those are the types of things that you can work on. You can be coached to do, whether it be Toastmasters or something along those lines where you feel more comfortable with public speaking. But I think what's going to drive you there is your desire to serve that mission or the passion you have for the mission will cause you to go spend energy to go develop those skills. Right? So if you recognize as a leader that you are an introvert and you don't feel comfortable with the public speaking, but you have a passion for the mission of the company or the organization which you're leading, then you will find the way. You let that passion drive you to take the necessary actions that you need to take in order to develop those skills along the way. That's what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. So great conversation, but let's move on to the last one because we're running out of time here.
All right. The fourth competency we wanted to talk about is this staying present, and then of course being vigilant and course correcting. It's very important that to understand that we live in this world of distractions, and probably now more than ever, Christine, with the hybrid working and so much of it is being on Zoom, we don't necessarily get to see all of the actions of the other person. We don't see the subtle body language or the exhale of somebody when you've said something that in a meeting that doesn't necessarily quite jive, and so you don't get those moments where you recognize the need to pause. For leaders, I believe that this critical competency of being able to be present, really present, and have that active listening for your team, and to look for those subtleties, the nonverbal communications, and whether that means a call before or after the Zoom or setting up one-on-ones, which is one of the things that I try to coach with my clients, is you need to take the extra step. What we've been doing over the past year and a half has been really band-aids and triage. We really need to move into a mode where we're gonna need to be present for that person fully, and that's going to need to go beyond the Zoom meeting that we have with our teams. We've got to go beyond.
It's no longer soon we'll be back in the office. We'll just wait till we're back in the office.
Exactly. So we need to cope with that. We need to, of course, this is the new skill that we need to be not only staying present for the individual. I did have a client who really believed that they were being present, but their body language and their communication style was telling their employees that they were not being present. And this was something that came up in that 360 evaluation you mentioned, which was something we were able to focus on, right? How do you become more actively engaged with somebody with that effective listening skill to be a better leader and to connect better with your employees? Mm-hmm. The second part of this is, of course, being vigilant and course correcting. I see too many leaders, Christine, that they set a course and then they're just too I don't know, frightened is the right word, but just hesitant to change course, even when they know that things are coming off the rail. But then on the flip side, you don't want to be changing your strategy every day of the week, right? So you have to learn to be present, but also take a look at the facts and the details around your tactical plan. Your vision and your mission will always stay true, your core purpose, if you will, as a leader. If you know what that is and you keep that in your focus, then all the tactics can change as needed based upon the facts.
Yeah, it's really embracing, more of this like design thinking where it's about reiterative, like constant iterations on doing and then assessing and making adjustments along the way. And that is going to get you much farther than also to, the other side. You said you see people being quite rigid on like, this is what I did, said I'm going to do, and I have to stay the course, even if it's showing to go off the rails. The other is like getting caught in analysis paralysis of just trying to come up with the perfect way of doing things, as opposed to, making movement forward and then adjusting along the way.
Yeah, I think the key is really, if you are going to make a change, to be very effective in the communications in terms of what the change is and why the change occurred. So if you can explain that and get people bought into the idea that the change was necessary and they understand what the new direction is, you get the team to move with you, versus you're moving on outside of the boundaries and the team is a little bit lost.
Right, and even embracing those, I would say the core characteristics of like flexibility and adaptability for your whole entire team. With, I think the caveat being, like you said, is focusing on the bigger picture, that ultimate vision. Like that's not what you're changing. But if you can show how making adjustments is actually moving towards that, I think the team will be much more likely to go on. And I really think that what we're talking about too is helping build what we've identified as being like an overarching core competency, that all of these different core competencies working together are really helping to do is build resilience, which is definitely needed in this type of environment.
Absolutely. I believe that resilience starts with having a positive attitude, right? As a leader, you really, you mentioned it the other day when we spoke, Christine, you got to be willing to fall flat on your face, but you get up and you get up again and you get up again, right? So positive attitude. Second is, great leaders are able to reframe challenges, reframe different things that happen in the workplace, failures, if you will, into learning opportunities. So, start with a positive attitude, learn to reframe. And then, I mentioned it before, it's finding that passion. If you're passionate about your work, it's what drives you to get up after you've fallen flat on your face, to get up again, because you are pursuing a mission versus something just for yourself. It helps to drive you forward. So I think that this resilience topic, it starts with that positive attitude, and I don't want to forget that, it also starts with self-leadership, right? You need to be able to have self-leadership, self-care, emotional intelligence, take care of yourself, mind, body, and soul, meditate, read books, listen to music, whatever it takes for you to kind of recharge yourself and to find peace with yourself. But taking care of yourself is a big part of the mental resilience, is having the physical resilience as well.
Exactly. It's the on the airplane, when the mask drops down, it's putting the mask on first, so you can put it on your child or your team or what have you. It's really important, like you said, is that self-care and making sure that you're aware of what you need in order to be able to help others.
Yeah.
I feel, John, we answered a little bit of a question we had, but it looks like there's another question here. It's saying, what we just said, great, that said, but is there a common trait characteristic that we see among our clients? How about you?
A common characteristic related to resilience? Or
I'm not sure. I think it might be in general, if we're seeing some common.
Well,
competencies or traits among all of
well,
our
it could
clients.
be because you're a coach and you're talking to people who want to be coached. But I do really I'm impressed by the number of people who want to improve their skills, who are
Yeah.
really dedicated and committed to improving themselves and improving the environment for their teams. The leaders are really focused on what their teams think of them and the trust and the environment of the social culture that they're creating, the culture they're creating for their teams. I'm really heartened by that. I think that's just amazing that people are so dedicated and want to focus there.
Yeah, building on that, and again, it could be selection bias of those who are already working with coaches, but another one is just the openness is really coming at the experience of what they can learn and that they want to learn and that they're willing to, we go back to the vulnerability and willing to be open to maybe what they don't know and what they what they can learn and how they can grow in order to be a better leader for their team.
Yeah, that's that vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
competency we were talking about.
We have one more question, and the question is, when is leadership considered a failure?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways to answer that. I would say that from what we've talked about today, and maybe my own past experiences, that when you start to think of leadership as something you're doing for yourself versus something you're doing for others, I think you've failed. Right? This idea of this entitlement, and I dealt with a number of executives who were, interested in the next promotion, worried about the corner office, what were their perks as far as, size of their office, the furniture that they had. It was all sorts of weird stuff. But if you lose sight of the fact that you're there to be helping others to grow and to be better employees, to be a better team, I think you've lost something there. I think you're failing as a leader.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there, and I would also add to it. It's almost not admitting failure. So those who are more closed-minded or like just really unwilling to admit when maybe they do need to course correct and what are areas that they need to grow in. Many times that can be related to leadership failures as well.
Right. Tell you what, Stefania, in the short amount of time we have, why don't we jump to the slide on what's the next step? I think we're ready to go there. All right. So those of you who hung on till the end, right? First of all, I want to say thank you to Christine again. Great insights today. Love working with you. I hope we're able to do this again.
Yeah, me too. I've had a lot of
fun. We just have so much in common, and I think our perspectives are really helpful to our audience. So for those of you that hung on till the end here, right? So there's a couple things where we've got the complimentary Intelligent Leader book. That's the one that I showed you earlier, right? There's a link. Stefania will put this into the chat, and we've got tell us where do we send this to you, and we'll make sure we get it out to you. There is a link that we're going to put in the chat, which is schedule some time with me. We can do a coffee chat, 30 minutes, just like to get to know you, like to understand what your challenges are as a leader. What do you think of this webinar? What are there questions you had about the competencies that we talked about today, and how to go about building them? Anything's fair game in these coffee chats. So go ahead and schedule some time with me. And then the third, of course, is that for those of you who did, this is a surprise one. So for those of you who did attend the webinar, I'm going to offer a complimentary leadership assessment. Assessment is really a leadership style assessment. It's about a 20-minute form that you fill out, and you get the results right away. And I think it's every client that I've had go through this has found a lot of value in just getting some perspective on their own traits and characteristics as a leader. So
starting to build that number one competency we talked about, self-awareness.
Absolutely. So want to thank you all again for your time today. And if there are any other questions, Stefania, we can open it up now and see if there's anyone has questions they'd like to ask beyond what we've already tried to answer.
Sure. And just a note that I did put this all in the chat. We'll also send up a follow-up email with the calendar and also the assessment information. So so just to see if there's any questions. I see a comment. I really enjoyed the format and quality of content. Thank you. So that was a really nice comment.
Thank you.
That's all Christine's fault.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this too. I think I put this in the comments that I think you guys could have your own show, a leadership show. Very entertaining to watch you guys.
No, it's great to talk to people. There's so much going on in this field right now, and I'm excited, about people engaging around this topic and wanting to be better leaders. I mean, it's important. I think that we all engage in it. We share the ideas. And we help leaders to find their way forward.
Yeah, it can feel very isolating for many leaders. And like I said, many times I'm working with those at a middle management level, and you'd think middle managers, like, that's not very isolating, but it really can be. And, feeling like they're not sure who to talk to and get those different perspectives and feedback on. And so I think working with someone like yourself is a great way to be able to get that support when we really need it right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, are there any other questions, Stephanie? Because we probably are over our time.
I think we're good. And we're just at 1 minute out. So just
That's impressive. I'm very impressed with ourselves, John.
All right. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it. And hopefully you'll join us for our next webinar.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me, John.